Hi, everybody. Welcome to our final webinar, CCRS support webinar this year. We're excited. We're going to show you some great examples of how several of us are working with integrating all the standards, and hopefully you can pick up some great ideas and you can share some great ideas as well. I am in charge of clicking the slides. So yes, I'm here, and Lindsey Cermak is also here. Lindsey, if you'd like to say hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to see some of you again, or we will be seeing you again from last week. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is going to be a great webinar.
Indeed. Oops. Sorry. You know, you guys, I'm learning these platforms just like everybody else. Great. Also assisting today, we have Patsy, Astrid, and Marisa. Do you want to say hello? Patsy already did.
I already did, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again.
And hello, everyone. I'm here in kind of a support role, so welcome to the webinar today.
Thank you. Marisa has been helping us run these webinars smoothly, so we thank her for that. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Zoom platform?
I will. So this is Patsy, and a couple things to know. I think many of you I've recognized a lot of the names here were on previous Zoom calls and such. So in the upper right-hand corner, you can change to a gallery view, or a speaker view. And since we're actually not using cameras except for the person speaking, that might not apply today, but something to know. And then if you hover your mouse over at the bottom, you'll see this dashboard kind of appear out of nowhere. It's pure magic happening here at the bottom, where you get a mute, a video that you can turn on and off. You can see who's here by clicking participants. You can open up the chat box. So I'll invite people to just open that up. And what I like to do is just open up the chat box and leave it open so that I can see what people are chatting. If you want to do that and say hello, feel free. If you want to practice for a moment, always a good idea. So feel free to open up that chat box. And you'll notice in the two, there's like two and then a button. You can choose everyone in the meeting or just one specific person and use the chat. And then a couple things to know: if you are someone who would appreciate using closed captions, that's an option at the bottom, as well as the super fun reactions buttons, where you all can clap or give someone a thumbs up at any time during the webinar. So something to know. And on the next screen, we have a couple more tidbits. Again, there's that chat box. If you have, I see a couple people. Thank you, Teresa and Vicki. I've already tried it out. Be brave, chat something, and let us know if you're having any trouble figuring out how that works. And I think there's just one more slide here around Zoom. If you are calling in, you can do press or *9 to raise your hand. Otherwise, to raise your hand, you do that by clicking on participants, and then a cute little blue hand shows up next to your name, and you can click that, or not next to your name, but at the bottom of the participants, so that you let us know you would like to speak. That's what I have for you about the Zoom platform. I'll turn it back over to Kristine. And then I will let you turn off your video if you're not speaking. So when Teresa's back, we'll have her turn hers off. Go ahead, Kristine.
Okay. I'm back. I'd like to talk about the objectives for today. And we've got some great things planned. We want to talk about how all the standards are at play currently, and what we're doing, what we're teaching, and how students are learning, and how they may look depending on if they're in one lesson or across a unit or a week or a few weeks. We have Stephanie Sommers here today, who's going to share some TIF resources and lessons. John Trerotola, who's going to share some civics education resources. Also a little bit about what he's been doing and platforms he's been using in his organization. We're going to demonstrate, Lindsey and I both have Google Sites, and we want to demonstrate a little bit about how we put those together, and talk a little bit about very specific digital literacy skills students have needed to learn to navigate the many, many pathways, technological pathways we're asking them to right now. And then we want to identify some readily available resources, PD opportunities, et cetera, that can help and support you as we're all dealing with this situation. Lindsey, do you want to do the warm-up question?
Yeah, so to get started, we thought it would be fun, I don't know if that's the right word, but to chat what you are feeling or what you think of when you hear the words all 3 sets of standards. What immediately does that do for you? So if you can, or to you, if you can just chat a few words, adjectives, descriptions, maybe it gets you excited, maybe it makes you feel overwhelmed, overwhelming, pressure. What else? Oofda, I like that one. I say that a lot. Anxiety, overwhelming, comprehensive, where to start, one thing at a time, help at the same time. Do I have to do that? Will I ever be able to walk away from the computer? Oh my gosh, goals. I love that. Hashtag goals. They're great. I want to use them. I don't have time for all this planning. A lot. Oh my gosh, I love this. Thank you all for making me laugh today. Help, ... Oh my gosh. Our goal with this, in setting this up is to showcase that we are actually already doing a lot of this work already. And that's one of the things that we want to demonstrate, that you are all probably hitting all 3 sets of standards in some way, shape, or form currently. So yes, there's always the one thing at a time someone wrote. Like, we can always be improving, we can always take steps forward, we can add, and we're all works in progress, and our classes are works in progress, but we are already doing a lot. So thank you for participating in that, and I will turn it over to Astrid next.
Yeah, so as Lindsey said, that one of our main messages here today is that you can do this, and you probably already are doing this to a certain extent. We've heard over the past few years through our professional development surveys and evaluations, lots of people saying, okay, I get it, CCRS, or I'm starting to use North Star, or I feel like I'm getting ACES TIF under my belt, but how do they all fit together? And that's today we want to give you some solid examples of how they work together, of how they can work together. And hopefully to make it a little less overwhelming to you, let's go to the next slide, Lindsey. We want you to think about a variety of ways you can approach your planning with the various sets of standards in mind. You might think about targeting multiple standards in one setting, in one lesson, or the metaphor of one balanced meal where you have some CCRS and you've got some TIF skills to support that, and you've integrated North Star digital literacy. So that's one take, and that would be an ideal lesson. But it's also fine to think about a more balanced approach to meal planning, and thinking about over the course of a week or a unit, how are you bringing in the various sets of standards and giving your students the opportunity to develop their basic literacy and numeracy skills, to develop their employability and soft skills, and to work on their digital literacy skills over a period of time. And hopefully that makes you feel a little less overwhelmed when you can think about how you can do this over the course of a unit, and not trying to cram the standards into every single activity that you do with your learners. So as we move forward with this webinar and our time together today, what we want to do with our various panelists is highlight what teachers are already doing in their virtual classrooms to integrate these different sets of standards, reassure you that you are probably doing the same, and help you to see how you are doing that. And then challenge all of us to be transparent with our learners so that they can see how they are developing skills in each of these 3 big areas of basic skill development, soft skill development, as well as building digital literacy skills. So Kristine, can you talk through some of the resources that are already out there?
Yes, and actually Kristine and I are both gonna tackle this. And so Kristine, if you want to click on these resources, and we'll just briefly scan through just as a visual, but these resources really, they're here for inspiration and ideas, not that they have to be used exactly as they are, you can tweak them, but there have been classroom activities that have been developed around COVID-19. So there's some, addressing like ACEs and TIF and COVID-19, about self-management and navigating systems, learning strategies. And so that is there for you to use. We have ELA and ESL activities that have been developed, again, targeting that CCRS content, but using what's happening right now for students to talk about. And then there's also some math and numeracy resources, that content, targeting some math content, and also then again addressing the pandemic time that we're living in. So there's those classroom activities that are there as inspiration. We also have several newsletter articles that have been written around, talking about digital literacy skills, talking about ACEs, TIF, talking about the content, that just perusing back through those newsletter articles, because I know that we've gotten lots of emails and lots of webinars lately and things to just, maybe we're still catching up on all of those things. Definitely it's worth going back, taking a look, seeing if any of it sparks inspiration for your own class to tweak. But all three sets of standards have been touched in some way, shape, or form in those newsletter articles as well. So we wanted to highlight that. And then also, this is a new thing. Kristine and I were talking, and this kind of came up as an idea. And then I created this as a template that we could be using with students as we're checking in with them in this time. I'm, a learning reflection plus a preparation for meeting with your teacher. So the first two boxes or two sections of this graphic organizer is them reflecting on their learning. Maybe you've been mailing packets to students, or maybe they've been completing online work, or maybe they're reflecting on class from that day is, okay, what have I been learning? What was difficult for me to understand? Challenging them to list one or two things about the activity that was confusing. And then the second page is really kind of preparing students to be able to have a meeting, getting used to the idea, if they aren't already, because some of them already are used to this, but if they aren't used to having an agenda or taking notes during a meeting, giving them that template to kind of work through and reflect before they have that meeting with you, whether it's over the phone or over Zoom or Skype or Google Meet. And then having them think through these questions, having them write questions, and then but be thinking through, what questions do I have before they meet? We give some examples on there. They have a chance to write, and then encouraging them in the meeting with you to be taking notes. What are we talking about? What are me and my teacher and I talking about right now? So this is an example of a graphic organizer that you could send out to your students, whether it's mailing paper-wise or whether it is sending it electronically. But the idea is that students are preparing for a meeting before they meet with you, not filling it out together, and then bringing their notes to the meeting and taking notes as you guys talk. So just a lot of different self-management skills happening, ACEs, TIF, things like that, reflecting on their learning, metacognitive skills. So there's that, and then I actually have been adapting it to my classroom right now. I have not used this exact one, but I am setting up student conferences with students, and I have sent them a Google form in a text for them to fill out before we meet. And so I haven't used all these questions for the purpose of my meeting. It's a little bit different, but again, I want them to do preparation before we meet and start thinking about what's gone well, what challenges are they having in this online environment, what questions do they have for me, or have you been able to connect to the resources you feel like you need? But I'm having them do that pre-work before we meet. So, but yeah, so we just wanted to show you some things that are already out there. Kristine, if you want to say anything before.
Well, I believe that people, the link is there in the PowerPoint. Patsy's been gracious enough to share links in the chat box. Teachers can make a copy of that and adapt it, correct?
Yep.
However it would work. I like this idea of having students think, because I notice that as I'm pushing them a little bit, they're getting a lot more specific about their needs or about how things are working for them. And with a little bit of guidance, they can make the time as productive as possible and make sure that they get what they need. Thank you, Lindsay. Now we are going to hear from Stephanie Sommers. Stephanie is from Minneapolis Public Schools. She is also the ACES coordinator, so she is always helping us to see the opportunities for ACES TIF, the soft skills development that students, the skills that they're using quite frequently right now, both for learning and living. Stephanie, just let me know when to click the slide.
Okay, thank you so much, Kristine. And thank you, Lindsay and Kristine and Patsy for asking me to join you today. I don't often get asked to join webinars as a guest panelist, so this is kind of fun. So yeah, I have been thinking about how these times when we've all gone to distance learning, what kinds of opportunities the way that we structure our classrooms and activities can create for helping our students to continue building their ACES TIF skills. So the next few slides are going to be focused on that. So we can go to the next slide, Kristine. Okay, so I am just going to go over like sort of big picture about some different TIF skills, and then I will then after this, the slides will be more specific with specific examples. So when I think about the categories from the TIF, the 6 categories, I think 5 of them work really well for when we think of in terms of distance learning. So the first one, effective communication. The skills I'd like to talk about are engage positively and actively with individuals in both one-on-one and team settings to accomplish goals. And then utilize a variety of technologies for communication. I'm going to pause just very briefly for anyone who might be a little bit new to our field or to teaching in our state. ACES TIF, one of the 3 sets of ABE content standards in Minnesota. ACES is the name of the initiative, so to speak, and TIF, the Transition Integration Framework, is a booklet in which the 6 essential transition skills are listed, and there are 6 categories. There are 6 categories of skills, not 6 skills, and then each category has main skills and sub skills. So I've got the main category on the left, that's effective communication, and then on the right, these are some of the main skills and sub skills. And so we've got utilize a variety of technologies for communication as our other skill here. Then learning strategies. Apply appropriate strategies to organize, retain, and review materials in order to aid in understanding and recall. For critical thinking, the one that came to mind for me was solve problems. Okay, and we can go to the next slide. For self-management, manage information and materials for one's own learning and goals, and manage time effectively to complete tasks. And then for our final category here, navigating systems, seek information or assistance appropriately from others in order to successfully navigate specific systems. So I tried to, when I was working on this, think about the different platforms that I know many people are using to work with their students right now. Some of the ones that came to mind would be Zoom, what we're using for this webinar today. In my program, and I work for Minneapolis Public Schools, we're using Schoology and also Schoology conferences. So our teachers are doing some synchronous classes on a regular schedule using Schoology conferences. And then we're also organizing lessons asynchronously inside the Schoology platform as well. I know some people are using Google Classroom or Google Hangout. There's also WhatsApp as another connection tool. And so thinking about some of the different features that these systems have in common, maybe, I was thinking about effective communication. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, oh shucks. I was having trouble with one of my screenshots the other day, and it looks like it got reversed again. So a little bit of, actually looks a little bit like Shining, from The Shining there, some crazy language. Sorry about that. So for effective communication, I think about how we can create opportunities for learners to communicate and collaborate using a variety of tools. And so I know these platforms might be slightly different, but I think many of them have either have a chat function, or in Schoology there's discussions, discussion feature. There's sometimes shared notes. An interactive whiteboard can be used in Schoology, for example. For some programs that maybe aren't using like a learning management system like Schoology, some people are just using email to communicate, maybe Google Docs for collaboration, or text messages. For example, using an app like Remind for that. So these screenshots happen to be from Schoology conferences. So in the left corner of your screen, there's an example of a discussion. So this came from one of our classes. The teacher's working with her students on writing a GED essay and starting to look at the pieces of an essay. And there's an example in a New Readers Press book about green energy. And so she had her students working with that essay. Some of you might be familiar with it. And so she put up a discussion to kind of activate background knowledge about what actions students are taking in their own lives that might be considered green. And so I know you can't see it very clearly, but the student then, one of her students responded, and I did block out the name, and wrote something on the discussion here. And the Schoology discussion feature works a lot like Facebook, where students can comment, other students can come in and like that post or reply to the post. So it is a great way to get students interacting with each other and commenting on each other's ideas, maybe building off of each other's ideas. Overall, I'm thinking about ways that we can create opportunities for teamwork, even in these virtual instructional settings. Next to that, this is another feature from Schoology. It's called the shared notes feature. So when we do Schoology conferences, there's something you can open up, a feature on the screen that's sort of like the chat here in Zoom, where you can use it for note-taking, but also anyone in the conference can come in and they can add, by typing on their own computers, they can add to the notes. And so with my writing teachers, we've been experimenting with how we can use that feature for some collaborative work. So a teacher might, sort of like you do a warm-up in class, she might put a few sentences up there and then invite her students to work together to correct the mistakes. So you can see my examples here: my family home, the car not working, bloom in spring. And then we would ask the students to practice adding to the notes to correct those sentences. And my third example, which is unfortunately backwards, was using the whiteboard feature in Schoology with those same sentences. And I was trying to show how students can collaborate and use the tools that you can see on your screen, the little pencil there, for example, to write on the screen so that other people can see what's happening. So I'll read these for you. I know they look crazy, but the first one says, my family stays home. Okay, the second one said, the car is not working. And then the third one, flowers bloom in spring. And so again, these are just some ways that even when students can't be together in one space, they might be able to collaborate online and practice their effective communication by engaging with each other to correct the sentences, for example. I also want to say if anyone has other ideas, things like this that you're doing, but maybe with a different platform or a different type of technology, please chat it out. I would love to see other people's ideas. So feel free to chat while I'm talking so that we get more ideas of what people have been working on, okay? And then we can go to the next slide, Kristine. Okay, so for my next example from learning strategies, I should say that one of my roles in Minneapolis is to be the adult diploma coordinator. And so since we have gone completely virtual, I have been trying to find ways to put units of instruction up online, and they would sort of be self-paced modules, if you will, that a diploma student might work through that would help him or her to create some evidence that could be used in a diploma portfolio. So my first module is connected to one of our units from our regular reading classes, our ABE reading classes. And it's a unit that's contextualized to cover social studies content. And the particular unit is about the controversy, if you will, around Confederate monuments and whether or not to remove them or keep them up or put them in museums or just add, informational plaques, those kinds of things. So each of my units has a reading component, a listening component, a writing component, and then eventually I might try to add sort of a speaking component where students create some slides and then present them to me or their teacher virtually. But these particular screenshots come from the listening and speaking component. And I've been thinking about what kinds of supports our learners need so that they will start to develop habits that will help them be successful as they navigate being independent online learners. And so one thing that I did was create a screenshot, or I'm sorry, not a screenshot, I'm sorry. I created a small screencast using QuickTime, a video about how to take Cornell notes. And so that's sort of what the little screenshot is. That's a screenshot of my video. So just kind of a reminder that we can still provide these scaffolds and supports for our students, but we just might have to be a little bit more creative about how we do it. So that video is about an 8 or 9 minute video, which I will say admittedly is a bit long for a mini lesson. But it talks about why it's important to take Cornell notes and what the benefit is. And then as the students watch the video that's in bed, there's an actual video that they watch, which is from a longer piece in which Ann Curry, or I'm sorry, it's not Ann Curry, a reporter travels around the South, Katie Couric. She travels around the South and she talks about meeting with different people, and it's all sort of around the Charlottesville rally and what happened there. And so I created this sort of guided, scaffolded notes for doing Cornell notes, and this is included in the course. And so this is just a kind of a lot of context here to try to explain. Trying to give our students supports where they are becoming more independent learners, I think is really important. And so I give directions in my Schoology course asking them to copy down the chart just like they see it. And then they can watch the video and then watch the longer video for the course and start to take notes here. And so going along with that, just telling students they're going to need things like a piece of paper, a pen, a pencil, as they start to move through these modules is another part of learning strategies that I think is important as our students are moving to being online learners. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so when my program moved to online learning, we did a lot of work with our teachers practicing and troubleshooting within our platform Schoology conferences to kind of see how it worked. And I think this same idea, our motto was, we're just going to try it out. We're going to see what happens, and we're going to troubleshoot and try to fix it. And I think we also need to do that with our students, and we need to provide them with safe, low stakes opportunities for practice. And so these screenshots are just kind of representations. Like, for example, one of the things that a lot of teachers talked about is there's a feature in Schoology conferences, just like there is in Zoom or other platforms, where you can mute your users. The problem is the user has to unmute him or herself, and this is a privacy control in case the learner had muted himself. The idea is that the presenter cannot unmute in case the person were having a private conversation at home, for example. I hope that makes sense. So we talked about ways doing actual direct instruction and helping our students practice with using the mute feature, because they have to learn how to do that, and they have to understand that they're not going to break anything in the platform. And if they run into an issue, it's okay to try something, click on something to try to solve the problem. Another one was using the chat. Just like we encourage you guys to chat, we work with our students to find ways to be able to communicate with the teacher. If you're having a problem during class or during a lesson, how do you encourage your students to get in touch with you so that you can help them brainstorm and troubleshoot together? And that comes around to the critical thinking. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, some of you might have seen a recent article that was in, I think it was last week's ABE newsletter, when I talked about an app that I have been really excited about called Trello. So Trello is, it is an app that allows teams to collaborate to finish projects. It's actually, if you were to look it up, it's considered a project management app. And I have added it under self-management as an example here because I am really impressed with what great possibilities it has for working remotely with our students. Basically, Trello allows your student or any user to create these boards, which are kind of like virtual to-do lists. And you'll see here that this example, Halimo's diploma, has 3 boards: things to do, doing, and done. And then on your boards, you add cards and notes. And so these were some examples that I created to put visuals into my article. But basically, everything that a person would need to do to complete a task, like earn a diploma, for example, they could organize onto their boards. You can also add comments, you can add links, you can add checklists, you can add attachments, and then a user can share his or her board with other users. So it's a great way to collaborate and to help you as a teacher to support and help a student move through a larger task. And so it's something that I've been really interested in experimenting with recently. And it's a great way, it would be a great way to practice self-management with your learners. Okay, and we'll go on to the last slide here. So my last TIF category, navigating systems, we're looking at seeking information or assistance appropriately. So what you're seeing on your screen comes from a colleague of mine in Minneapolis, and she created she's using these different icons to help her very low level. So she teaches beginning level ELL students. And when her students join her conference in Schoology or access her materials, she wanted to provide a consistent way for them to kind of understand the navigation. And so I really, really like what she's done here, where she's got an icon for click, for watch, for read, for choose. And then you can kind of see a little bit how she does it to give directions. Look at the picture, read the sentence, choose the true sentence. And so there's a picture, this is kind of about daily activities here. And you're clicking A, B, or C, you're choosing who's doing what in the picture. She's got the read and write icon for a close activity she created to go over some of the grammar structure. And so I think adding supports like this is a great way to help our learners become more independent, because they are being trained to rely on these visual cues to help them understand the directions and to navigate. No, this is not from Trello. I'm sorry. This example that you're seeing right now comes from one of my colleagues' Schoology courses. The picture specifically, I believe, comes from a Ventures book. The rest of the icons are things that she developed. She probably found them through clip art. And the activities she created as assessments in Schoology. So this is actually part of a lesson she would show her class. I'm showing it because I really like the way she's got these visual cues working to help her low-level students understand the tasks. Okay. All right. So I know that was kind of a lot of information quickly, and I will stay on for a little bit, and if anyone has questions, I can respond to your chats. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your webinar.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. There's so many good things there that my mind is kind of racing right now, but clearly how important those soft skills are for students to be able to work with the tools that we're using and continue their learning. And those are great examples. And no, I don't have my camera on, Patsy, because I am going to pass it to Lindsey. Lindsey is going to talk about her approach to integrating the standards right now.
Yes, so I teach GED classes with Literacy Minnesota, and we're transitioning to be, for my class, to be more of a pre-GED skills-based class. If you want to go to the next slide, I put this up and I found this nice picture of work in progress, because I feel like this whole concept, or this whole idea and this whole goal, I like the hashtag goals from earlier, of integrating all three standards is just, it's just that. It's a progress. It's a work in progress all the time. So the things I'm going to share with you are things that just kind of organically happened, naturally came out when we were tasked with, okay, teach online. But I think that I know that there is a level of intentionality now that I can bring and say, okay, this is what has happened, and I'm going to show you what has happened, but I can also be choosing to integrate more. I say that to encourage you that you have probably organically already started doing all of these things, and maybe you've already been identifying things, as Stephanie was talking, that you're currently doing. Yeah, so this is what happened, but I can definitely keep progressing with this. So before students come to my class, now they have a mini orientation. They are first set up with Zoom and Schoology, the apps on their phones. Some of them have computers, most students have phones. And then we set up a Zoom call and we have a mini orientation. So it's about a 15 to 20 minute call. We go over kind of what's the class about, what are my goals with the online class, what resources are available to them to keep studying on their own. We look at my class website. And it's nice that they're already in Zoom, so we can do a little practicing of annotating and chatting before they enter the class, which is nice. And then when they're in the class, these content standards, ELA, I'm doing a reading and writing class and a math class, and we're using Zoom. And then they're also having to navigate the class website in order to join the Zoom class. So I am not texting them the links. I am saying the link is posted on our website, and then I will text them the password, but that's it. But I am directing them to the website in order to join our class. And so just getting them used to that, because I am trying to create our website, establish our website as the central hub of information for when we get back to in-person instruction as well. And then after class, like homework plus ongoing communication with students, they are using the website. I'm directing them to the website for different resources. I have study resources, community resources about food and healthcare on there as well, announcements, the links to the class. And I have a mini review of what we did each day if they were to miss the class. I am also currently getting everyone's permission to be able to record our classes, and then that will also be posted on our website as well if students miss class. So just navigating the class website in general. The expectation for missed class, because I am posting those mini reviews and eventually I will have the links to the classes, the recordings, I am establishing the expectation that I want you to look at least the review, the little blurb about what we did before you come to class. I want to spend less time reviewing because I was spending way too much time reviewing, and we weren't able to make progress for those students who were attending regularly. So just trying to have that be the culture. We're using Schoology for the homework for reading and writing, and so just getting used to using that platform and submitting assignments. Like I said, with the consent form, we used HelloSign. It's working beautifully. If you want more information on that, let me know. But students are able to navigate and sign electronically and give consent for the recordings. And then I'm using Google Forms to sign up for student conferences, fill it out through our website, and then also a follow-up confirmation. Hey, this is going to be when we're going to meet at 11 a.m. on Tuesday. Here's a link to a form that I want you to fill out before we meet. And so giving them that Google form in preparation as well. And then I'm just texting students through Google Voice. So with all those different things, that's what's happening, kind of like the meal planning approach. It's not all in one lesson, but these are the different components. If you go to the next slide, then I just wanted to call out some specifics. So for example, in math, a specific domain that we're working on right now is ratios and proportional relationships. And we've been talking about calculating percent change. And so I post the learning targets for every class. So these are some examples. The second one I'm always having as one of my learning targets. I can share my thinking with others and provide reasons for why I think that. And so that brings in more CCRS standards. It hits the math practice 3, constructing viable arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others. So I list some math practices there as well that we are routinely hitting. And so with sticking with math practice 3, I'm really good at asking my students, why do you think that? Or how do you think that? The way I'm trying to push myself now is to help the students interact more, and then say, before I comment, say, okay, what do you think of what Mary just said? And have others join that conversation. I'm trying to be more intentional about that. But I'm posing problems. They're having to make sense of them and persevere about, I'm also having them create questions. I'm giving them a scenario, making sense of it. What questions could we ask about this? Reasoning abstractly and quantitatively. We are doing, calculations of percents and talking about that, but then we also are taking a step back and thinking, what do percents mean in general? So in a little bit more abstract way versus just the reasoning through a specific problem. And then math practice 7 about looking for and making use of structure. That just screams patterns to me, and that's the goal of my math class. It's not really a leveled class. It's called Math Conversations. I'm trying to get students used to seeing patterns between numbers, understanding number sense, what quantities mean. So that's just an example of like the CCRS content that I can hit in a lesson or over the course of a unit. If you go to the next slide, some digital literacy skills that I want to call out. They're filling out online forms, and I have created Loom videos that have instructions on how to fill out like the hello sign, for instance, that consent and release form. This is what it looks like, and I'm able to kind of walk through, this is where you will click, this is what it's going to look like when you're emailed the form, click here, it's going to ask for your signature. And students have it's been very successful. I've had 10 students successfully fill it out, just waiting on about 5 more students to fill it out. But otherwise, most people are navigating that without any questions, which is awesome. So I've explicitly taught that skill and then explicitly walked students through how to download apps, the Zoom and the Schoology. So they're getting taught that, and there's some specific teaching around the different features of those as well. But things that were just happening that I haven't necessarily taught, but that we're using, so we're kind of throwing students into it, completing assignments on Schoology, just saying this is how we're going to navigate our class website. This is how you're going to get all the information, logging into Zoom for class, and then utilizing the functions. So some things I haven't directly taught, but we're still using these digital literacy skills. And if you want to go to the next slide, the ACEs TIF skills that I want to call out, the effective communication, the one that Stephanie highlighted about using a variety of technologies for communication. We're using different ways of communicating, whether it's through text or through the chat or annotating on the screen, talking. There's just different ways that we're doing that. I've developed some group norms about our, which could probably actually go in self-management, but develop some group norms about our videos and turning them on and off and what that means, muting when we do that. And just trying to encourage students to have paper and pencil handy during lessons, because we're going to work out some math problems, or I want you to write down what you think a summary statement of this paragraph is. Critical thinking, we're solving problems in math and having to identify what information we need to solve a problem. Or like I said, they also are creating their own questions to match scenarios. With the student conferences, identifying potential barriers, what's challenging about this class, monitoring progress, what's going well. So trying to help them do some metacognitive reflection as well. And then the last thing, navigating systems. I'm trying to establish norms. So the following norms of an organizational structure, and I think of this in terms of like my class. So if I have a student who texts me, wait, what's the password, or what's the link again? How do I log in? This is the website. This is how you're going to do it, instead of being inconsistent, being very consistent with how I want them to find the class, how I want them to log in, how I want them to sign up for student conferences, and creating those. So these are things I'm doing, but I could be doing more. Or I could be intentional about, oh, I want to get better at just one of these things and do and intentionally decide to add. But you're probably already doing these things as well in some way, shape, or form. So that's the cool thing when you get to stop and reflect, like, what am I doing? So if you want to go to the next one, I might be done. Yes. All right. So we are going to give you maybe 3 to 5 minutes or so. It says 7 minutes, we'll see with time. But we want to give you a chance to get into breakout rooms. And so these are the questions that we want you to talk about in your groups. And Marisa just chatted them so that you can copy and paste them if you want to make sure to have them, if you want to jot them down, or if you want to, I think if you just look at the chat when you're in the breakout room, it should stay there. But these are the questions. What are some very specific TIF skills that you have had to teach students recently? And what are some very specific digital literacy skills you have had to teach students recently? Is there something you've explicitly taught? Or if you want to also talk about what am I doing right now that, oh yeah, I'm doing this. Oh yeah, when she said that, it made me remember, it reminded me that this is what I'm already doing. So we want you to reflect on those two specifically, the TIF, ACEs skills, and digital literacy skills. So I'll let Patsy take it from here.
Great, thank you. So if I have worked all of our breakout room magic, you're going to be dispersed automatically into a group of 4 or 5 people. And just a heads up that those of you who are co-hosts on this will go into a room as well. And if you need to exit, just do that. You'll have about 6 minutes to talk about these questions. They're in the chat box, which you should be able to access when you're in the room. You should be able to unmute and turn on your video when you're in that room so you can see who you're talking to. And we'll come back in a little over 6 minutes. I'm going to go ahead, right? You ready? All right, here we go. Welcome back. Looks like most people are back. Dan's sitting outside, looks nice. You're sporting a nice pandemic beard over there in Hopkins, Dan. I'm loving it. All right, there are a couple of people who still have their video on. I invite you to just double check that it's not you. Turn your video and audio off for us and we'll regroup here. So thank you so much for joining us back. I'd love to hear a couple of things that you thought about and talked about. And I realized that some people were in larger groups and some in smaller. We're still working out the kinks. It's a work in progress, but it worked. So we're glad about that. Thanks for your patience as we navigate this new platform. So before we move on to John, though, Kristine, did you want anyone else to perhaps shout out something that happened in their group?
Sure. If anyone had a particular, a very specific TIF skill that's kind of on your mind that you have had to teach explicitly or has come up, and what are some specific digital literacy skills you have needed to teach, or maybe some that were a bit of a surprise? Go ahead in the chat box. I did make a comment before we went into breakout groups, listening to Lindsey say what I hear teachers say all the time, like, I know I could be doing more. And it just tickles me all the time, because teachers can be working so many hours and doing all the things and still thinking they can do more.
Right, well, that's because you're amazing, everybody.
That's just, I guess that's just the breed.
It's kind of the nature of adult educators today, I think. Well, I'm not seeing any hands up, and I think people are just eager to hear from John, I think is what's happening.
Yep,
so I think maybe we'll just do that. All right, I'm going to close out my sound and video and turn it over.
Yeah, John. So John Trerotola is going to be talking a little bit about what he's been doing. I know he has a bit of a CCRS focus, but he is my teammate. In the evening, I work in the day, and I think he's going to have some great things to share. So John, you want to turn on your video?
There we go. All right, thank you, Kristine. Yes, it is. Someday we'll have to get a actual professional picture, but I think this one seems to be working for this online type of model that we are now doing. So what I'm going to talk about, and thank you, what I'm going to talk about today is kind of where I've been and where I am now, and kind of where we're going to be going with this in not only the near future, but the far future, in terms of some of the resources that have really adapted well to an online type model. So way back in February, which seems like a million years ago, Patsy asked me to write an article about the coronavirus, and we had this kind of lengthy deadline to publish it, and it understandably kept getting closer and closer as everything started changing at that whirlwind type of pace. And the idea of the article was to support teachers by offering options for engaging students and identifying reliable news sources, building those critical thinking skills. And two takeaways from that article, even though that was about 3 months ago now, but are still very relevant, is that it is more critical than ever to discern information from misinformation. And this not only helps our students, but it impacts their families, the communities, and the resources that I've found incorporate, just think about how many ELA, CCRS standards can be incorporated into those type of lessons where they encourage that evaluation of arguments, addressing two texts on a similar theme or topic. The second takeaway too was that educators, practitioners, are in such a unique position right now to engage students in those questions about civic and social responsibility during this pandemic, and making those important connections between past and present events, exploring, especially from that social studies or civics perspective, geographical, economic implications. And the possibilities are endless. They were endless back in February and March. And now they are even more endless as we are going through this crisis, but also thinking about the future and how in future classrooms we'll be talking about the pandemic, the coronavirus, with that civic social studies type of lens as well. So the next slide, please, Kristine. Where kind of am I now? I am the first to admit, totally unprepared for the switch from in-class to online instruction. And I teach the language arts with Kristine as my partner in crime in the language arts area at Robbinsdale. And I also teach the social studies as well. And I needed to initially develop those strategies to move my in-class instructional practices to a more distance learning type of a model. And by doing so, I didn't want to lose that incorporation of many of the ELA standards that I had had in my in-class instruction into the online type of instruction. The challenge, though, in that is that many of the in-class lessons were not just going to perfectly move from one delivery model to another. And the other challenge, too, was all of these resources and strategies and suggestions were coming at all of us at such a massive pace that I had to then kind of step back and say, here are 10 or 12 of those resources that I'm going to use that I will explore further, and that can be used for both that synchronous and asynchronous type of online learning. So I had started a class website a few years ago and had never quite finished it until the last 6 or 7 weeks. Currently, I use Google Sites to create this website. My co-teacher, Sarah, and myself share the website. Sarah teaches the math and science, and I teach the English and social studies for our afternoon and evening sessions. But the website includes lessons for all 4 subjects. It also has links to those GED practice sites, the videos for the extended response and that type of thing, and also some other links to some of those more standard, so to speak, online platforms such as MobyMax, Edmentum, and Read Theory. I also do teach a college preparation class. It's kind of an advanced ESL type class for HTC students, and I have created a website for that as well. And the 2 websites, I've included the links to them, and please feel free to take a look at them, copy, paste, take away anything from them. It was really a wonderful experience. It was a challenging experience, but a positive one to create these websites and to make them hopefully manageable for my students. The big challenge with the websites is what lessons to embed in them, and also what lessons to provide students. We also do 2 Zoom classes each week that alternate between the 4 subjects. And again, it's kind of thinking about what kind of lessons to embed in the websites, and also what kind of lessons should be presented during these Zoom video classes. So what I basically did is use the CCRS ELA standards as a guide, a roadmap, if you will, to pick and choose those online platforms to present to students. So the next couple slides, what I have done is put together over the last 6 or 7 weeks. I have, as I mentioned before, kind of taken a lot of those, some of the sites I've used, some of the resources I've used in the past, or ones that I had never used. They were much more technology driven, always sounded like a good idea, but now had that opportunity to really explore them. And many of them that I had not used in the past, I have incorporated in with success, and I'm very pleased with many of them. So what I thought would be useful is to briefly highlight a few of these resources, and many of these resources do incorporate the ELA anchors in writing, reading, language, and speaking and listening. And also many of them are really good for that language arts, social studies, civics, skill combination that is so relevant for today. You all may be aware of many of these and use them, but there are ones, as I say, after 6 or 7 weeks that are working really well for me. So for reading, Common Lit, I use that as on my website and embed lessons from Common Lit. It is a CCRS ELA reading anchor's dream, but there are also really good articles about social responsibility, that civics connection. For example, I recently assigned one on the idea of herd behavior and why do people follow the crowd. And there are also so many related societal theme sets also within Common Lit. For writing, ESL Library. There's a small subscription to sign up. Subscription price to sign up for ESL Library, but well worth it. And the ESL part is just kind of in the name, and this can definitely be used for all students and at all levels, kind of basically level A and B, and for some of the higher ones as well. So I have this on the website. I assign assignments, writing assignments through this. They have a great mini debate section that gives students a chance to write arguments or options or opinions at the lower level on a variety of topics. Quill is one I've always thought of. Quill is now free, and definitely I would highly recommend it for those language conventions. It is leveled for both ESL and academic skills. They have diagnostics, and even a little social studies connection there too, where there's sentence combining practice. They have excerpts from history as examples that need to be combined together. On the next slide, I've put down 2 excellent resources, both that I had not used in the past, but I'm using now more for my Zoom classes. So Nearpod and Parlay are perfect tools for kind of that digitally, so to speak, speaking and listening tasks. So basically on Parlay, it is a roundtable type of platform where there is a question that's presented, and then students can then build on each other's ideas, thinking about that speaking and listening anchor 1, building on each other's ideas, critiquing each other's ideas, and debating them as well. Nearpod, same type of thing, where it is more of a collaborative type of lesson website where students can all give their input during the lesson framework. And again, for speaking and listening, would highly recommend both of these. And finally, those sites that are good for not only meeting many of those ELA standards and anchors, but also incorporate those social studies, civics, skills, and topics into them into just a nice combination. There are 2 that I would really recommend. One is this one from Civic Online Reasoning. It is so good for that initial question, or some initial ideas that I brought up in that article about information versus misinformation. And Civic Online Reasoning, very good. A lot of their resources are Google based, so it does help if with the Google Docs and that type of thing. But they do look at, or their lessons are based on that authority, reliability, examining evidence of not only websites, but all types of resources, social media, news stories. And it's at a little higher level, but many of the lessons can be adapted for that, that definite critical thinking skill. And finally, News ELA. Many of you, I'm sure, use this one. And what is nice about this, at present is they opened up their social studies and science content. And yeah, News ELA is always so good because the social studies, it has those content topics, the very straightforward topics about government and economics and geography, but then also gives the opportunity for students to practice on those all-important reading skills as well. So in conclusion, definitely please take a look at many of these resources. The websites are included, and please, if you have any other resources that you use, feel free to share those at any time. And just as a final thought, I'm just looking forward to not only using these online, but then finally having the opportunity to incorporate this technology into my in-person classes as well. So thanks so much for that. And I think Kristine is now going to talk a little bit about her website, and we'll look forward to that.
Thank you so much, John, for all those examples. I know that one thing that John and I have discovered on Quill, for example, is that you can co-teach classes on Quill. And so we are sharing some classes. I like that idea for going into the fall of co-teaching. So a Nearpod was like a revelation to me, also from talking to John. So that was, it's good. There's lots of things out there. And as we're settling in a little bit more here and thinking about opportunities for the future, I think that we are going to hopefully use a lot of these platforms in some way and continue to build rich instruction. So yes, I am the literacy and ELA coordinator at Atlas, but I'm also teaching 11.5 hours a week in the Robbinsdale Adult Academic Program. So in the midst of the webinars and all the things that I do with Atlas, the newsletter articles, etc., I am also working with my own students, and it has been quite a learning experience with the idea of what kind of a meal am I serving, or am I serving like a balanced meal across many meals. I'm doing weekly meal planning. I've got a website, and I am posting multi-part ELA and social studies themed lessons. I also started posting these mini ELA lessons. There's a place for GED writing, and I have information about additional online practice. I'm actually going to show you some screenshots of my website and show a little bit. I've kind of got the mishmash where there was TIF ACEs, and then Lindsey was very specific about math and some of the TIF skills and how she's doing instruction, and John was really focusing on the CCRS. I have the collection of things just to show how in different ways that was not where I wanted to go yet. How I am incorporating things. So for example, my ELA lesson this week is focused on looking at phone use and how it affects one's life, particularly, oh, I have a typo on there, social media use. To look at patterns and to analyze perhaps how our social media use is connected to our moods. So there are some ACEs and TIF skills definitely built into this, and students in this particular lesson have to think about categorizing positive and negative effects of tech, critical thinking, learning strategies. They are going to need to record their social media use in a graphic organizer, and then navigating systems, recognizing the consequences of overuse of social media and options for change. So these are a way that I have incorporated ACEs into a particular lesson plan. So I do things very much the same as I would be doing them in the actual classroom, starting with some kind of a warm-up. Sometimes it's a grammar warm-up. In this case, it's a quick write for this particular multi-part lesson. I've recently been playing with Kahoot. For any of you who have used Kahoot, it's kind of fun. You can create some really fun little quizzes. You can use just pictures, or you can create quizzes. There's a lot of quizzes already there, and students don't need to sign up for it. They don't need an account or anything. They can just click, I link it. I've been incorporating a lot of short videos. Sometimes it's me, and I'll do a little introduction to the lesson. In this case, it's a very short video. I try to keep them to 2 or 3 minutes, about how a study where these people were looking to see, as they were watching people walk by in New York City, you know, what people's behaviors were with their phones. Students have multiple options, and I have this, and I remind them of this constantly, and I have it all over the website. They can email me their writing or work. They can text me different things, short little quizzes. They can text me. They can record a short video of them answering a question or two. They can take pictures of what they're doing. And so it really is. I have 10 students engaging right now, and none of them are doing the same thing. So keeping to the same types of activities. For Newsela is my main platform that I'm using for text right now. I have a class set up, and I've had to assist students. I've recorded some videos, taking them on Screencastify, taking them step by step through showing my screen how to sign up for Quill and for Newsela. I like Newsela because I can control the Lexile level, and I like it. Sometimes I use the quizzes that are there, and sometimes I create my own quizzes. But I like the fact that I can look and see the Lexile level, and that the questions, there are 4 questions, and I usually want to ask more questions, but the 4 that are there are text-based. And so every time I post a lesson, I repost the directions, and now I have students who have accounts, but I'm always reminding students who are just starting out. And sometimes I'm using Google Forms. I learned a very important lesson with Google Forms. I learned that I need to require their email, because I got several Google quizzes filled out, and I wasn't asking for email, so I had no idea who they were from. So make sure that you enable the email. What I use these quizzes for is I like to do deeper work. For example, for a social studies lesson, state and federal governments, I created a vocabulary quiz focusing in on some of the real key academic vocabulary for students. Also, text-dependent questions. Sometimes I will take the 4 Newsela questions and I will build them into a longer set of 8 to 10 questions that focus, you know, starting at main idea, have some vocabulary questions, look a little bit at text structure, move into inferencing, that type of thing. So I like that students are getting some experience working with these Google Forms. For some of the writing, I am using Quill, and I have gotten students, you can set up some nice diagnostics that give you a lot of information. There is some really great sentence combining activities that I really, really like, because it's right where we were when I stopped teaching. And so students can be doing very simple connecting with just and but, or they can be doing much more complex sentence combining with subordinating conjunctions and semicolons and those types of things. Grammar Bites is not available for proxy hours, but I love it so much, and I've used it for so long. And students can click and go right to these interactive exercises. And so I do remind them of that on my website. I have both text-based writing and personal reflective writing in these lessons. So for example, my social studies lessons so far have really focused on the COVID situation and its connection with social studies. So I had a lesson on, you know, what are the powers that state and federal governments have? What is the 10th Amendment? And right now we're hearing all this stuff about governors are saying, well, I have the right to do this, and the president says, I have the right to do this, and digging into that a little bit. I did a second one about the First Amendment. And the writing, one of the writing activities is that I got 5 headlines, and using what they've learned about the 5 areas of the First Amendment, being able to explain the connection between the particular headline and the particular area. Also, for those of you who saw the change agent was requesting articles, I did take those questions from the change agent and I worked them into a lesson. I like this idea of students writing about COVID-19 and their experiences, and the idea of them documenting their own history, that their perception of what's happening and their experiences is a very important part of history right now. So I do have personal reflective writing as well for students. I've just begun using vocabulary.com. I have a few students who are struggling with vocabulary, and you can have a free trial for up to 3 students. And I have a couple students keeping track of words to give to me. I did sign up for Vocabulary Spelling City. Several teachers have told me this is a great website. There is a 60-day premium membership available. It was for Teacher Appreciation Week. And this does require students to have a username and password. I'm trying to ask students, when you create your username and password for Newsela, create the same, just pick a username and password and stick with that if you possibly can. They already have their read theory passwords. So, but really trying to kind of consistently use the same passwords. But again, I want students, I like vocabulary.com because of the way that the vocabulary words are explained. I want students to be able to use it as a resource, that learning strategies, you know, compensating for knowledge they don't have. So again, using text with academic vocabulary, but then doing specific work with academic vocabulary is what I'm trying to do with the CCRS. Digital literacy skills. I shamelessly stole the slide from Lindsey. I'm walking students directly through setting up accounts. One lesson that many of my students had to learn explicitly was how to check their spam folder for emails, because my emails were going into spam folders. I am now going to be setting up some Zoom one-on-one meetings. I've had some students who would really like to do some work with me that way, and including certain information in emails and text. When you text me or when you email me for the first time, it's really important you include your name, because I can't always tell from the email address. General uses: navigating the website, filling in forms, logging into specific platforms, you know, the email and text responses, rewatching videos, controlling videos, opening up windows on the classroom site. And I communicate this way. I'm looking at the time here. I email and text blast students twice a week. And I've started doing mini lessons, and that picked up several students last week, where I said, do you have 30 minutes? This is how you get onto Quill and do this one compound sentence combining activity. I also have a mini lesson that I sent out last week that said, you know, you're all on read theory. Here's a reminder, this is your username. Read one passage, take one quiz, and you're keeping your skills fresh. So I'm finding that that is working for students. I'm using text now. New students are really jumping in our process at Robbinsdale. That's been really exciting. And as soon as I see a student accessing a platform, I immediately email them or text them and I say, I see that you got on, way to go, you know, and I'm watching you and I'm proud of you, and you know, let me know if you need anything. So I'm doing those things as well. So I don't know, Patsy, I'm going to ask you to come on here for the Let's Chat. I don't know about if we have time. I don't think we have time to chat.
Yeah, we're actually pretty close here, but maybe what we can do is, if people have ideas that they want to post in the chat box here as we're closing, that would be ideal. And then, of course, if you have questions for any of the people who presented today, chat those out as well. Otherwise, we don't want to keep people past time, probably.
I would say, just if I have 1 second, I am going to quickly show, please go check out my website. And again, like we've all said, take anything, steal anything. Here's an example of resources that I have set up for students with information on how to get onto each of these. These are the main ones we're using in our program, including GED testing service. I also have the link to Grammar Bites, AccuPlacer Practice, Typing Club. These websites work pretty cool. Once you do the work of getting them set up, then it's just a matter of keeping them up. That the most of the work is in the beginning. So I encourage you to check it out.
Great, thank you. We did have a good question from Rebecca about the links that were shared in the chat, and yeah, we'll distribute those by email. So not to worry about all the great stuff that was shared. We'll get that to you along with CEUs for this session. So thanks for the question. Let's go ahead. I think you had a couple of closing slides just to keep us to the end here.
Yep.
So we did have some upcoming professional development. I think a lot of people, I'm recognizing a lot of names here. So we have a couple of virtual coffee breaks coming up. So you can join Kristine again on the 19th for English language arts. These are informal, just time, places to gather, talk to your colleagues about what you're doing around a certain topic. And then Panda, Wendy Sweeney will be joining us again on May 27th for a coffee break on mental wellness. And then we do have some additional webinars coming up soon that you see listed here. And I'll invite Marisa, if you don't mind, to put the virtual offerings doc in the chat as well, where people can see all of these coming up. But just to know, yet this week, I mean, you could fill, there it is. Thank you so much, Marisa. You could fill your calendar with webinars. There's good stuff afoot. Susan WB coming on board with a DL platform course approval process. So if you're curious about that, I know that came up a couple of times today. Pronunciation with Andrea Eckelberger, and then later this week, a panel on adult career pathways at a distance with Heather Turngren and some panelists as well. So good things happening. If you're not already, be sure to join the Schoology group. I'm not going to dwell here. We've said it on everything every time, so you know where to find it. Please join us if you're not there yet. And then just a reminder, of course, to read your newsletter. It comes out every Tuesday with lots of distance learning related and COVID related articles every week. So please join us and keep track of what's happening. Great, Kristine and Lindsey.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I know we had lots of information. We will get those links out to you. Actually, hopefully you got some good ideas. I know that I was inspired to create my Google site from a sample of a low-level ESL Google site. And I was so excited about the videos and the different sections and the mini lessons and things that it just sent me off. So with my higher level GED diploma. Lindsey, do you want to say anything in closing?
I thank you for coming and sharing sharing in the breakout groups, and thank you to John and Stephanie for sharing your ideas and what you're doing. I think there was so many links and so many ideas going around that we have things to choose from, all of us individually, and we don't have to choose all of them, right? Like what is the next thing that I could do? I don't have to do all of the things, but like, what's the next thing? And so there were lots of different examples shared. And so I'm grateful that I got to hear about what other people are doing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. Sometimes there's so many things, it's overwhelming. So I agree. Choose one thing to explore this week. I'll invite anyone else who was a presenter or panelist and Marisa, anyone behind the scenes, to turn on your cameras to say goodbye here. If anyone has any additional questions, we will stick around for a few minutes. We'll stop the recording here and just let us know if there's anything else we can do for you. We're